Hi guys, the Island Girl, and I'm back with another one. And today we're checking out why did American cars fail in Europe. I'm getting this one from Motive. The link will be in the description below. Please go over and show him some love. All right. Why did American cars fail in Europe? Do you know? Because I don't, and I'm going to find out. Let's find out together who don't know. And for those who know, let me hear your thoughts in the comment section. So if you're new here, welcome. Don't forget to hit that like button and hit that subscribe. And hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you on board. To all my regular schmeglers, day one to the past to the poofs, thank you for always being here with your girl. We're going to dive right into this one. Here we go, right about now.
I'm sure you're all aware by now that American cars and American manufacturers simply couldn't take off in Europe. No matter how much they tried, two of the big three simply couldn't get enough people interested in their cars. Why did this happen? Well, the simple answer is they didn't do it properly. And that requires us to start with looking at the one automaker that did do it properly. Ford. Ford is, to all intents and purposes, an American automaker. However, when it came time to expand into the European market, Ford actually put a fair amount of thought into it. They did have a presence before that, but the Blue Oval's European outfit, aptly named Ford of Europe, was founded in 1967, merging the automaker's UK, Germany, and Ireland offshoots. That's the Republic of Ireland, by the way. In 1967, the first model to appear from this new merger was the original Transit, which would go on to become the literal face of vans in Europe, certainly the UK, and rightfully so. Ford of
I remember those old van, boy. I remember the look of them old vans, them little. Listen, that was the look. You're right. Even in Jamaica, I remember seeing them. That brings me back. I'm an oldie, guys. I may look young, but I'm an oldie. And he's right. That took off back then. Interesting. Let's continue.
Europe continued to do the European expansion properly by opening production facilities all over Europe. Today, the European arm of Ford operates 7 manufacturing facilities on the continent, in the UK, Germany, Romania, Turkey, and Spain. Ford also did this whole thing right by developing and designing cars specifically for the European market. The Fiesta, although they tried to market it to North America, which failed miserably, went on to become such a huge success in Europe that they discontinued it last year. Nice. Yes, I'm also bitter about the Fiesta's discontinuation, but it really was hugely successful in Europe, and the same applied to one of the C-segment's darlings, the Focus. Ford's first crossover SUV specifically designed for Europe, the Kuga, also did and still is doing great, and the same could be said of their Europe-specific minivans, the C-Max, the S-Max, and the Galaxy spelled with a Y at the end, by the way, which all showed the continent that minivans don't have to be boring. So there we are. Ford of Europe did everything correctly as far as an expansion to Europe is concerned, which is why they're still very successful here. So what happened to the other two? Let's start with everybody's favorite manufacturer of totally reliable cars, trust me bro, General Motors. Like Ford, General Motors also had a pretty substantial presence in Europe by the latter half of the 20th century. They had acquired Opel fully by 1931, and then in 1990, they acquired Saab and managed to destroy them in just 20 years. Great job. 4 years prior, in 1986, GM also officially formed General Motors Europe, which relegated GM's operations in Europe to Opel, Vauxhall, and then Saab. Now we arrive at the early to mid-90s. This was the time when another, seemingly unrelated, but actually very relevant to the story, automaker was entering the European market. Daewoo. Daewoo cars started to trickle into Europe in the 90s with a focus on value for money. The Tico, based on the 80s Suzuki Alto, was a beats-taking-the-bus type of vehicle, but it sold like hotcakes, especially in former Yugoslavia. One above that was the Nexia, which was a small, Golf-ish sized hatchback, and you could have a sedan too. At the top sat the Espero, which wowed journalists at the time for offering a ton of equipment for basically no money. Continuing into the late 90s, Daewoo's Lanos, Nubira, Evanda, which was also known under 10 different other names, and the horribly ugly Takuma were all doing fine in Europe. And then Daewoo went bankrupt and General Motors scooped them up in 2002. With General Motors now at the reins of Daewoo, they devised one of the stupidest, most befuddling strategies I've ever heard. General Motors founded Chevrolet Europe in 2005 in Switzerland with the promise that the Chevrolet brand would return to Europe. However, there was a problem. The real Chevrolet's lineup back then was entirely unsuitable for the European market. The Avalanche, the Impala, the Silverado, the Blazer, you get the idea.
Oh, that's where they boo boo. They make it, they think that they're in the US. Just this Ford catered to where they were. So, okay, we need to appease, we need to please the people, we need to make it so it can fit the terrain. It's affordable. It does what it needs to be done. That it needs to do with the area that it is in. I guess, or what the people like. I guess that's what Ford did. But General Motors on a different hand, I think they try to make what you're used to in the US region to give it to them the same way. And they have two total different tastes. Yeah.
Big cars, even bigger engines, terrible gas mileage.
Yeah.
None of these qualities are something that the average European buyer was looking for.
There you
So what
go.
did Chevy do? They rebranded Daewoo models from their Korean arm as Chevrolets and sold them in Europe. Yep, instead of doing the Ford thing and opening proper manufacturing facilities in Europe and designing cars specifically for the European market, Chevy just crossed out the letters Daewoo and wrote Chevrolet in Sharpie. And hey presto, new car. This resulted in abominations like the Chevy Spark, the Aveo, the Lacetti, the Captiva, and my personal nut favorite, the Orlando. Sure, you could still buy the Corvette and the Camaro in Europe, but these were meant to be Chevy's volume sellers. I think that the only somewhat good car to come out of this whole Daewoo bullshit was the Cruise. They were in Macedonia volume sellers because Macedonia is a poor-ass third world country and people needed cheap cars. Eventually, Chevrolet withdrew from the European market in 2013. By that point, GM had already shuttered Saab due to their bankruptcy issues a few years prior, leaving Opel as the only presence General Motors had in Europe, until Stellantis acquired Opel in 2017 and made them 15 times better, that is. So there we are, Chevrolet failed in Europe because the Chevrolets that most people were buying were just thinly disguised cheap Korean cars that were about as desirable as getting a sledgehammer to your face.
Dang.
That leaves us with the last remaining member of the big three, Chrysler. Originally, Chrysler had a decent presence in Europe thanks to the merger of Simca, Roots, and Barreiros. Apologies if I didn't pronounce that.
Did not know they had Chryslers there. Okay, what did they do? Did they did the same thing like
correctly. And eventually the PSA group would continue selling Chrysler vehicles throughout the 80s badged as Talbots. Or at least I think so. That's all the sense I could make of the research I did online. It's a little complicated. So that technically means that Chrysler did the Europe presence thing properly at first. They rebadged various vehicles from the aforementioned brands, all of which were European, and sold them as Chryslers in Europe. That's fine. So what happened? Well, Chrysler was acquired by Daimler AG in 1998, leading to the creation of Daimler Chrysler. This gave Chrysler money, which they would eventually burn completely, and Daimler was losing so much money on Chrysler that they would sell them again in 2007. However, this also gave Chrysler a channel to re-enter Europe once again. And they did. Now, as I mentioned up there, GM's big mistake was convincing Europeans that they're buying a Chevrolet when they were in fact buying a Daewoo. In other words, they plucked cheap cars from their Korean arm and sold them to Europeans.
Here we go
so what
again.
was Chrysler's big mistake? Chrysler's big mistake was not bothering with basically anything. The relaunch in Europe featured the compact Neon, the Stratus midsize sedan, and the Voyager minivan, or as you may know it, the Town and Country. Sure, the Voyager offered a diesel engine and a manual transmission.
The Town and the Town and Country, what a name. Unlike here, it's called the Soccerman van. The Town and Country. I'm sorry, I thought that was one. Who wants it? Nobody wants it. They are cheap stuff to try to make it look cute. Listen, but it's silly. Why would Chrysler make a mistake like that and see that their counterpart, well, they made a huge mistake? Why wouldn't you have look at Ford system and say, all right, make sure we have manufacturers here to get things done the right way so we can stay in business?
Transmission because Europe, am I right? The Stratus, which was actually a Dodge vehicle, by the way, was available with either a 4-cylinder or a V6 engine. Remember,
go again.
Mid-sized sedan in Europe in the 90s with no diesel power. Here's an interesting fact. The cops in Macedonia used the Stratus for the longest time as a patrol vehicle. And as far as I've heard, all but a few of them went memories up, and I'm pretty sure that nobody else except the police force actually bought them as civilian vehicles. Either that or they all exploded or destroyed themselves. I don't know. Chrysler's not bothering with basically anything continued well into the late 2000s. The widely hated Dodge Nitro was worse than other European SUVs in just about every way, and it was too big for Europe. The 300C, while it did receive a wagon version, which was just a Dodge Magnum with a front end swap, and a diesel engine from Mercedes, was still worse than the European competitors in just about every conceivable way. Chrysler even tried to sell the widely hated Sebring to European customers. Yes, that includes the convertible too. Again, these were all vehicles designed for the American market,
Yeah.
and Chrysler simply brought them over and updated them slightly to meet European regulations. They were practically unchanged from their American counterparts. And that's a problem because it's a well-known fact that American and European car buyer tastes
It's
are
totally
vastly
different.
different. Oh, how could I forget? Chrysler also tried selling the PT Cruiser in Europe. That
You're
went about as well
lying.
as you'd expect. The writing was on the wall. The 300C completely lost to the E-Class A6 and 5 series, which is hilarious because the 300C of that time was based on the E-Class. The Stratus, meanwhile, lost out to stuff like the Passat, the Honda Accord, the Renault Laguna, the Audi A4, the Mercedes C-Class, and so on. The Jetta and every other C-segment sedans were running rings around the Sebring, and every other European minivan, the VW Charan, the Ford S-Max and Galaxy, yes, they were made by Ford of Europe, it counts, the Peugeot 807 and its siblings kick the Voyager's ass 10 times over. Eventually, Chrysler just completely lost its mind and decided to continue its presence in Europe in an entirely new and balls-to-the-wall way. The second-generation Lancia Thema was the second-generation Chrysler 300C with a few Lancia badges, and the Lancia Voyager was the same thing but for the later town and country. I also realized I completely forgot to write in the script that Lancia models were sold as Chryslers in the United Kingdom for no reason that I can think of. There probably is a reason, probably a weird, unusual reason either way. They did the long walk of shame back to North America, and eventually they wound up selling to Americans all of 2 cars, one of which recently went out of production. Nowadays, Stellantis is focusing its efforts on other Mopar vehicles, and Chrysler is left with just a single model, the Pacifica minivan. But that one is pretty good from what I've read, so that's okay. And those are the reasons why American cars in Europe failed. Thank you so much for watching this video, everyone. If you liked it, be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any other reasons for this,
I'll definitely hit like and subscribe. Did I hit like? I think I did. Yes, I did. I don't get it. Why would you bring a product to a different country that you know will not fit the country? Have you not looked at the demographic? Have you not looked at the market? Have you not looked at how I don't understand people on a whole. Do you not study the market to see what works well within one country? American like huge stuff. American like these big V8 engine. They like these gas guzzlers. European market don't like that. Why would you go out there and this different kind of style? And why? It's not a one fit all gloss. I don't get manufacturers like that. Don't you do your research in order to dominate a market? Guys, tell me if you agree with me or not, because I'm like, why would you expect that the same kind of cars that are here in the US would be compatible for persons living in the European region? No, they don't want it. Interesting. I didn't even know that Chrysler and GMC and all of them was in the European region. I had no clue. But Ford takes me back, like I said. And look, they did their research. They did the due diligence. They got manufacturers from there to do what needs to be done. And that's why they survived for a period of time. Are Ford still there? Asking. I think he said it. I'm not sure. It's the island girl and I'm running out of here. Be good, be kind, be safe. Love each other. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section on this. And I'll definitely catch you guys in another video. Bye.